answer I used to give when people asked, what kind of a radio station are you? I'd say, well, now, have you ever heard WMAL in Washington? Yeah. I said, well, we're kind of a down-home version of WMAL. Because at that time, there was a very relaxed and competent-sounding radio station. Good people on the air, a lot of good programs, and a lot of nice music. And we would say, as you recall, somebody would say, well, what is your programming? I said, well, we play records when we can't think of anything else to do. And that solved a lot of problems.
Well, I think in a community where there's only one station, I think the role that WJMA filled in the years that I was aware of it, which was from the early 70s through the mid 80s, I think that was it. I mean, I think they covered the local news, something that's sorely lacking nowadays, not just in Orange. I mean, it's in Charlottesville and in these much larger cities. It's just not. There's very little local news. You'll hear the announcer come on and read a couple of lines of local news, and then suddenly he's talking about something that's happening in Richmond or the House of Delegates. Well, that's not local news. That's state news that they're getting probably out of the Richmond Times-Dispatch or something. So, I think the local news was critical. And of course, the local sports was a big part of it. But I think just information, when there was bad weather, you found out how much people relied on the radio station when there was about 14 flakes of snow, because the lines would start lighting up and everybody wanted to know if you're having school tomorrow. In terms of what a radio station should be, I think it should be an informed companion. I mean, I think it should be something where you can get news and information and find out what's going on in the community. If it's just a jukebox playing music, I don't see much point in it.
October 10th, one of those years, it snowed like 10 inches here. On October 10th in central Virginia, the leaves are still on the trees. And this was heavy, wet snow. And I woke up and looked outside the window and I went, oh my God. And right about then, the power went out. I went, oh my gosh, we got a problem. And hardly made it to work because of the number of trees that were coming down across the roads and falling power lines that were still alive and dancing in the street with sparks and little blue explosions. And it was running a gauntlet. But the phone lines worked. And as they always do, because they're either underneath the power lines on the power poles, and they operate by, in those days, and made today, operated by battery, not by power. So the power was out, and I think even the radio station was offline. We were out, but anyway, the kids had gone to school, and we got a call from a kindergarten teacher at Unionville Elementary. And she was saying in a very quivery voice, says, when are you guys going to be back on the air? I've got a room full of kindergartners here that are freaking out. And so they had come to expect that friend, the radio station, to be there when they needed it. And I remember calling Stan Cron and saying, I don't know if you can do it or not, buddy, but if you can get us on first, it would really help. It'll really help you. And he pulled it off. I think we were back online by mid-morning, and we were able to kind of come out and say, we've had this problem. The power lines are out. Don't go out in the street and start looking at these power lines. They may still be live, but it was a real example of where the radio station was the community's friend and confidant. And those little kindergarten kids with eyes like saucers in the dark there at Unionville Elementary, I bet you when we came back on the air, they felt a lot better.
And one of the things about radio that is unlike any other medium, I think, particularly community radio, is that there's sort of a friendship that you develop. It's like you're sitting down and telling somebody the news or talking with them over the air about how their day is going. And I can remember one Christmas she came. I had never seen the woman, but she came into the radio station and she had brought me a Christmas present. And she left it there, and it was a little picture wrapped up of Jesus. And that's just, I've always remembered that as just sort of symbolic of the kinds of close ties that you're able to develop with listeners.
If I had to say what radio is about, it's about creating moments. It's about creating moments. Public radio, sometimes you call them driveway moments, but just, being a human being and connecting with your listener in some way that adds value to that fairly brief time when the mic is on, when you're not playing music or you're not playing a newscast. Those of us here on this side of the mic would like to feel that we're adding something to the equation when we have the mic on. And you can still do it if you try.
Bob Wade became J.D. Slade in 1981. There was a disc jockey. There was a disc jockey. He's a legendary disc jockey in Philadelphia. His name is Long John Wade. As a member of the union wouldn't allow people with the same last name in the marketplace. So somebody had to go. And since Long John had been there first, I'm sitting in the program director's office, and he said, "Look, the after rep says we got to change it. We got to do something." And at the time, there was a song by a group called Slade called "My Oh My," and he said, "Wade, Slade, that's close enough." And I was sitting there bellyaching about something. And he said, "You are such a damn juvenile delinquent." There's where the JD came from. I became JD Slade, and I think that was in June of '81. And it just stuck because it's a cool radio name, and I'd always wanted the old jingles, the jock shouts, "JD Slade," and because no parent names a kid that cool, but it stuck. And when I came back here, I just brought the moniker with me, and it's like, and just kept it.
One of the biggest stories that we broke was the shooting in Louisa County of Judge, I think his first name was Henry Cunningham, I believe, was shot on the bench by a man who walked into the courtroom with a shotgun. And it was one of the, either the deputies or one of the office administrative staff at the Orange County Sheriff's Department, because at that time they shared common radio frequencies, and they heard the radio call going out from the Louisa Sheriff's Department. And she picked the phone up and called the radio station and said, "You probably want to know that the judge has been shot down in Louisa." And I got right in the car, raced down there, and got there fairly early. I was the first media person on the scene, and found a couple of people who had seen some part of it, so I could get some information on tape and piece together a few things. They went looking for a payphone. Found a payphone back in those days that you could still unscrew the microphone portion, so I could do the alligator clips and clip it onto my recorder, and fed some of that sound up to Russ Roberts in the control room, and did a little voicer introduction and tag out of it. And then Russ whipped out the old razor blade and the splicing tape and chopped it up into a package report and got it on the air a couple minutes later. I know it won the Virginia Associated Press Broadcasters Spot News Story of the Year award, and I remember the station was also mentioned. The AP had some sort of newsletter print version that was mailed out to subscribers, I think once a month, and we got a mention in that as well, which went out to all the AP subscribers around the country.
You get a lot done with a Royal typewriter and a cassette tape recorder and a microphone and a pair of alligator clips. And you can unscrew that the mouthpiece of an old rotary dial phone and hook up those alligator clips and stick them into the headphone jack of the tape recorder, and then cue the tape recorder up to the actuality that you wanted to use, put it on record, pause, and get your microphone, and that would route your microphone straight down through those alligator clips right into the phone line. And you'd have the guy back there at the station with the Reeboks and go like that, and get that thing going, and you'd read your story, and when it came time to do the actuality, you had to quickly hit stop, play, and then it would play, and then when it got past your actuality, you would have to hit stop, record, pause, because you didn't want to record over your stuff, and continue with your story and then sign off and do that. And on a regular basis, it was cool. It was very cool.
When you're doing interviews with people and you want them to talk rather than asking them a question, a good technique is just to make a statement and then let them respond to it. So I was recording these things, and I would go up and I would talk to somebody, a shopkeeper who was across the street in the courthouse, and I would say, "Things don't look so good." And then the person would say, "Oh no, and I saw how this happened, and it was just the flames were coming out, and it was so terrible." And then I would go and talk to somebody about records. "Things don't look so good." "Oh, I don't know what we're going to do about the records we've lost, and we've got to call people in from Richmond and everything." So the running joke after we started listening to all of that stuff was my line that day: "Things don't look so good." So.
And another reason we won a lot of awards is because we knew how to put an award entry together. And I learned, that was one of the things I learned from Archie. And it was great. It's a pretty simple formula. Put together a really solid awards entry. Don't be shabby about it. Spend some time. Give them your best stuff first, your third best stuff second, and fourth, and fifth, sixth, and then your second best last, so you end on a strong note. So if you're going to give them a series of spot news stories, you give them your top one, let's say for your Best News Operation of the Year award, you give your top spot news story first, and then your second best last, so you end on a strong note.
I'm sitting here at the studio, and I thought, I called WABC. Cousin Brucey was on the air. Cousin Bruce Morrow, legend. I asked him if he would go into the studio and cut me some liners. And this is where the reality of what radio is about. He said, "Listen, cousin, you don't want me to have to go into the studio. You wouldn't want to pay what I'd have to go to get in the studio. But I'll tell you what, have you got a patch board?" And I said, "Sure." He said, "Well, just patch things in, and then put the phone down." And he cut me 6 liners on the phone that I used until I actually left the station. They were things like, "Hello, cousins. This is Cousin Brucey, WABC. Whenever I'm in Orange, Virginia, I listen to Big Bob Wade," because at the time that's who I was. And I got the biggest kick out of that. And as years later, I got to meet him, and I reminded him of this story. And it's like, and he didn't remember, but it's like he was gracious enough to say, "Well, that's good, cousin." So I was his cousin.
Bill Little's father, Big Bill, was our first Santa Claus, reading children's letters on the air. Big Bill's father went on for quite a while, and subsequently went to that great North Pole in the sky. Well, we couldn't go on the air and say, "Well, kiddies, Santa Claus has passed away." So we had to have another Santa. We decided we were going to make a change, and that I would become Santa Claus's postmaster. And nobody ever said, "How come this postmaster is opening our mail and reading it on the radio?" Forget that, children. So I would read, and I needed a helper. So Anne, I guess she must have been 8 or 9 years old, not any older than that, was recruited to be Miss Message, Miss Priority Message.
Merry Christmas. Yes, This is Santa Claus's post office. May I help you? Oh, yes. Postmaster is here. Yes. He reads the letters to Santa Claus every afternoon at 5:45.
One of the youngsters, Miss Message?
Yes, she was worried. Thought maybe your letter wouldn't get to Santa Claus.
Well, she doesn't have to worry. After we read the letters here at Santa's post office, Miss Message puts them in the mail pouch and they're sent right on to the North Pole.
There's another big stack today, Mr. Postmaster.
Well, we better get to that stack right away, Miss Message. Goodness, you are right. I never saw such a stack of them here. My name is James, and I'm 3 years old, dear Santa Claus, so my mother is writing for me. I've been a good little boy. So for Christmas, says James Jacobs, I would like to have a rocking chair. What else does he want? He wants a truck and some cars and anything else you'd like to bring me. Merry Christmas to you and Mrs. Claus, and, says James Jacobs, Jr., I'll leave you some coffee and cake on the table. Look at that clock, Miss Message. We've run out of time again.
We've just got to get organized around here.
Well, I'll see what I can do about it.
If we're ready to close up, I'd like to go to the store. I've got to do a little more Christmas shopping.
Me too, Miss Message. Good night.
Good night. See you tomorrow.
And so we'd read the letters back and forth and talk about the toys back and forth and just had the nicest time.
I think the balloon story was the best story I ever did, the best feature story I ever did. And I loved doing feature stories. I loved, and I really became a huge proponent of what I call the sound sandwich. And just layering in natural sounds to kind of paint the picture for you. The balloon story was a great example of that, I think. We were sitting up there and I had the thing rolling all the time, use of music, and interview with the background sounds of the hot air balloon going and up and away, the song and all that. And it was all very, very lighthearted. It was just a tremendous amount of fun to put together.
Imagine yourself walking in a field in northern Culpeper County. It's a beautiful October dawn. It's warm, it's still. You can see the Blue Ridge Mountains through the gloom. Total peace. What in the world was that?
Listen, when I get down lower, grab onto this rope now, okay?
Who said that? You look in all directions and you see no one. There's that sound again. Then you look up. It's a balloon! It's like a huge 6-story high multicolored tulip suspended in the air. It floats effortlessly. I got to ride one with my friend Greg Yates, and it was truly an experience.
Oh, I guess about half the people think I'm crazy.
Are you? Back on the ground, things seemed heavy. Walking was difficult. Maybe we felt a little bit like astronauts who come down after days of experiencing weightlessness.
Would you like to ride in my beautiful balloon?
If you want to go somewhere, flying's the way to go, but if you just want to have fun, ballooning's a sport.
Would you like to ride in my beautiful?
So sound was such a wonderful way. It's a wonderful way to convey and get the mind's eye to work.
One of my first ideas, I think, was in '74, was the Eddie Dean Show. And the fact that, the WJMA Sports Broadcasters Club was getting cranked up for Paul Sizemore, and the Orange County show was on Friday nights. And I went into Arch and said, well, you've got a coach right next door who's won the state championship a couple of times and played for it a couple more times. I did sports in college, and we could put together a 30-minute show potentially if he's interested, and run it a day or two early. And Arch said, "Well, go talk to him." But once I found out Eddie Dean was interested, I went back to Arch and said, "Okay, the coach is interested. So do you think we could make a go of it?" And he said, "Well, let's see if we can get some sponsors." And as I recall Arch saying, he suggested you guys, pick up the phone, call your best advertisers in Madison County, see if anyone would be interested in buying an Eddie Dean show. And I think it was about 20 minutes later, Arch stuck his head in my office and said, "It's a go. We're sold out."
Oh gosh, Ralph Law is still around, and he's the head of football officials for Central Virginia. And we wired him one night, and he's out there, and I remember Tom and I were working together, and we could kind of tell when the referees were ready to make their calls and whatnot. But Ralph had a tendency, he would cut on his microphone, but before it was done, he'd reach down and cut it on, and sometimes we would leave the volume up, not realizing. So they're measuring for a first down, and one of the officials says, I think this is the way it went. He said, "Oh, it's just a bit short." And Ralph said, "Aren't we all?" And Tom and I looked at one another, and Ralph remembers this story. We've talked about it many times after the fact. He remembers saying that. The problem with it was, not only did it go out over the air of the 5 counties and whatever we were covering, we had that year connected it to the PA system of the public address system for the high school, so that the fans could hear what the referee was saying. And he said, "We're short." And he said, "Aren't we all?" And I could see them breaking up down there, and we're looking at one like, "Gosh, where's the 10-second delay?" It was just like. And I remember after that, I always had to keep my hand, or he did, on the volume for that device to keep it from broadcasting out somewhere else.
We did a little league game, and there was a minor and major leagues. There were 2 minor league games and a major league game. The minor league games were only 6 innings, or 5. The major league games were 7. And one time, the playoff at Porterfield Park, and the little kids were playing, and finally in the 4th inning, the game was tied, and in the 5th inning, I was so happy because one team got 12 runs in the top of the 5th, and I knew this game was finally going to be over. But in the bottom of the 5th, the other team got 12 runs, rallied to tie. And this was just the first game. There had to be another minor league game, and then a major league game after that. I don't know what time. I think we were there till 1 in the morning.
And Pat always told us what she thought about sports. Pat had very strong interest in sports and very strong opinions. And eventually we called Pat's bluff and said, "We're giving you your own sports show." So we had a program on Fridays called Pat's Picks, where she would pick the upcoming high school games, a couple of college games, and some pro games.
How about Orange at Waynesboro?
I'll pick Orange. Orange, they said, I didn't see the game myself, was right impressive, though Powhatan wasn't that much, but the boys looked good, and Waynesboro lost, so I'll choose Orange over Waynesboro.
All right. How about your old favorite, Madison at William Monroe?
You know I'll choose Madison.
Why?
Even though it's at William Monroe and they always give them a good game, I'll still go with Madison.
How many straight Skyline games has Madison won? Regular season games?
51.
51.
That was including Friday night.
Okay.
I hope I'm right.
They won last week.
Right.
Washington Redskins surprised you last week and lost to the Chicago Bears.
By field goal.
What are they going to do this week when they open the season with the New York Giants?
Let's see, Ross. The Giants have had a real good preseason. The Skins have not. But George Allen has not lost a home opener, and they're playing at Washington, and I'll choose the Skins.
All right. You want to go on a score with that one?
I'm not very good at scores.
But you do predict the Redskins over the Giants?
Maybe by a touchdown.
Okay. Orange is going to beat Waynesboro. Madison will beat William Monroe. Loudoun Valley over Culpeper. And Louisa will beat Varina. Let's reverse that one.
Yeah.
Varina's going to beat Louisa.
No, yeah, and Culpeper's going to beat Loudoun Valley.
Oh, I got 2 of them backwards. Well, we'll find out who's right next week on Pat's Picks. Pat's Picks brought to you 3 times each Friday by the Charlottesville Daily Progress. Read about tonight's games tomorrow in the Daily Progress.
The worst game was a game canceled on Friday night with Cortland because of rain. And it got moved. It rained all day Saturday. They moved it from Saturday to Monday night. It was still raining come Monday night. And the water was cascading off the walls at the far end of the stadium at Porterfield Park, and half the field was covered completely with water. And they played the game on one half of the field, and they get up to the middle of the field and turn around and let you run the other way. And I remember watching the pylons float away. I remember cars sitting off sideways in the parking lot. And we called that game that night with the rain coming at us against this plexiglass. We could not see the players. We just made up stuff. No one knew. They were sitting home or in their car somewhere. They didn't know if we were right or wrong. We could not see the field. The torrential rains were so far. We were laughing at ourselves because we couldn't see.
I thought they were the best I ever heard doing local. I had friends came down to Grays one weekend. And on the way down, they tuned in the Orange Station because they knew I worked there. And they were listening to an Orange Spotsylvania football game. They heard Clint and Eric doing it. They didn't know Orange from Spotsylvania. They didn't even know where Spotsylvania was. And they drove around and listened to the game. They wouldn't sit down there, they wouldn't go in the motel room up at Gray's until they heard the game. They told me how good they thought the guys were. And they were good. They were just the very best I ever heard doing local sports.
Bill had the idea that he would sell Madison versus Orange, and he would sell positions. The quarterback position would be would be the most expensive in buying of advertising, and the receivers and the running backs, and the offensive linemen maybe paid a little less, and they got a few commercials in that game. And he had this great idea that we'd go back in the studio and we set up a metal vibrating football board that was popular with kids back then. And you'd line up your men, they sit on little felt things, and you'd turn it on, and it would run across they'd go just everywhere. And Bill was the director, and he would stand there, and Tom and I had our headsets on standing in the studio, and he would actually physically put his hand on a player, and he would have them start doing things. He'd send them over on the right side and bring them back to the left. He'd drop them back to pass. He'd kick. And if there was a flag on the play, he would throw this large thing that covered the whole board over it. And it must have been if someone stood there and watched it, they wouldn't have believed what we got out of it. I remember you, Ross, went out and recorded sound from local high school football games, the crowd noise. And we recorded a 3-hour high school football game between the Madison people. It was high school, what was Madison people versus the Orange people. And Bill insisted that we record 3 endings to a tie, an Orange win, and a Madison win. And he would flip coin then, and we did not know before it aired who was going to win, or was it going to be a tie.
This could be the ball game right here on a 3rd down call from the 3-yard line as Tucker takes from center, rolling back in the outside, looking over the middle. He rolls to the end, throwing to Johnny Worth, catches it for a touchdown. Oh, boy, he rolled to the outside, and the score for the Orange team from 3 yards out.
And there's no time left. Let's go down on the field with George Fletcher.
What a play. What a play. The fans are going crazy. Don Wirt makes the catch in the end zone. The last play of the game. I mean, you couldn't have written a better ending to a game than this.
We'll take a quick timeout and come back and tell you how this one's going to end up here, folks, this afternoon with our score. The Madison All-Stars 51 and the Orange All-Stars 50.
It's 51-50, Madison's favor, and we'll have Orange All-Stars coming out on the field.
All right, let's see. I don't think either one of these counties wants to go for a tie here this afternoon, but Stanley is lined up, Tom, in the extra point position with Tucker to hold. Metzger do the snapping. All right, they're set to go. The line is really packed up there for the Madison defense. The snap is back. Tucker's got it. Oh, he's going to roll out to the outside. He's looking to the flag on the corner and hits Ed Woodward for the 2-point conversion. Woodward with the snag on the end of the fingertips at 6'2", 196, and the Orange team wins 52-51.
Let's go down on the field with George Fletcher.
Things are crazy down here. I can hardly hear you, Tom. The fans have poured out onto the field. The players are mobbing Jim Tucker and Ed Woodward, who teamed up for that final 2-point conversion. They're going crazy, and Orange comes away a winner.
All right, we'll be back with a post-game show in just a moment. Our final score, sports fans, this afternoon in this All-Star game brought to you by the Sports Broadcasters Club once again. The Orange All-Stars 52 and the Madison All-Stars 51.
And we must have stayed in the studio 4 or 5 nights, I want to think, to do this thing. And it was such a cool thing to be a part of. And the fact that we'd advertise it saying there was going to be, like the War of the Worlds, a fictitious football game. And people began taking off work early or working longer so that they could take off on Friday afternoon because it was going to air prior to the nighttime game between Orange and Madison of high school football. And I think it started about 3 o'clock in the afternoon or 4. And people would show up at the station during that time and say, "Where's this game?" And we went over to the high school. It's not there. Is it being played at the other high school? And even though we had to say it was fictitious, people didn't believe it. They thought it was actually something that was happening.
Here we are trying to build a very professional sports department. We've gone out of our way. We've gotten better individually. Clint got so much better with his play-by-play. I got better with play-by-play. I got better at writing. I got better at my delivery. And when Bill came to me to want to do a farce, sports-related, I'm going, no, we don't want to do this. But again, when you go back and you talk about the personalization that we had already done, I'm going, you know what? This is sort of, in a way, giving back to those sponsors. And we're going to do something for you, the sponsors that have supported our ability to do broadcasts and do all those wild and crazy things. So it didn't take a long time to connect with, okay, the people we're going to be talking about, the people that are on those plays are our sponsors.
Now, you can't have stuff like that on big-time radio. Who in the world is going to go out and sell a whole bunch of tire dealers and things, positions on a fantasy football team, and put it on the air? That's what's so sort of good-hearted and foolish about things like that. It works.
We were at Louise, and I'm sure it was Orange playing them because we didn't do that many Louisa games, just Louisa and somebody else. And George Fletcher was with us. And there is a reason to Clint and my madness to have 2 ministers on that sports staff. Barry Penholler, and thank goodness for George Fletcher that night, where the game's late, and it starts to sleet, and then it turns to snow. And we're coming back in my car. George is in the back seat. Clint is in the passenger seat. And it's starting to snow so hard you can't see your hand in front of your face. The road is very slippery, an old Dodge, rear-wheel drive. I'm driving. And we're going down the road, and we start seeing these lights come right at us. They're going all over the road. Well, they've slidden over into my path. So I know George has got to be, if he was Catholic, it was hell, he was crossing himself. I firmly believe he was saying the Our Father. And I just took it upon myself. I said, guys, we're going on the left side. So I eased it over to the left. So we passed. I'm on the left side. They're in my lane. And we stopped to make sure we hadn't soiled ourselves. George couldn't get out of the back seat because his eyes were closed and he's still praying. So it was, that was the most memorable trip back I have ever had. Now, there have been some late nights, but that one was definitely the most memorable.
I started working Sunday mornings, and the most vivid Sunday morning was when it snowed, and it was a terrible snowstorm coming down, and I was so proud I made it into the station before 6 o'clock or whatever time we were signing on. I got there about an hour ahead of time to set everything up. Teletype was running stuff all over the place, and cancellations came rolling in. Every church called. Churches I had no idea even existed called in. Didn't even know if they were true or not, but we wrote them down and said every single one of them. And I decided, I said, I'm going to be great today. I'm going to take the weather forecast, have that ready, and I'm going out in the parking lot and I'm going to measure the snow in the WJMA parking lot. And I got a ruler out of Pat Watson's drawer, and I proceeded to go out the door, and as the door shut, it locked. And my keys were inside, and the Protestant hour was playing, but the Protestant hour wasn't an hour, it was only 30 minutes. And the tape was running, and I'm standing out there in my shirt sleeves, snow's coming down, and I wanted to measure the snow, and I couldn't get back in the station. I had to go next door to John Henry Ryder's, wake that family up, call you, Ross Hunter, say, would you please come down and bring the keys so I can get back into the station? And you weren't mad. And I was shocked. I knew I'd committed the mortal sin, and it must have been 15 minutes of dead air, and still the people called about the cancellations, and somehow we got back on. But that was a helpless feeling, watching the tapes run and being standing in the park.
I seem to recall we signed on at 7 o'clock in the morning on Sunday. The first program, memory serves, was the Protestant hour. And 8 o'clock something else. And at 10 o'clock, it's time for the Bible Way Spiritual Tidings program, the Elder Bernard Battle. Bernard Battle, at about the second to the last syllable, would race into the room. He'd throw up the control room. He'd pass a pile of records over, scratched records, Mr. Cleveland, the choir from the church, scratch record. These are the records. He'd go sit in control in Studio A. He'd sit down, and he'd begin praying for you and you and you. It was wonderful. And some days he never showed up. Some Sundays it's time for the Bible Way Spiritual Tidings program with the Reverend Bernard Battle. Reverend Battle's not here today. Didn't know until that minute. But we're going to play a little Grover Cleveland. And I always had a supply of records there, scratched records. I didn't want to break the continuity. Scratched gospel tunes.
And Sunday mornings, I don't know, Sunday mornings are just boring. They just seem like they drag by. And one morning, I don't know, I had the idea that I wanted to add something to Reverend Bernard Battle's show. And this was about the time that there was a band called the Watts 103rd Street Rhythm Band. And they had a song called Everybody Get Down on the Floor and Do Your Thing. Actually, what I did was I was timing musical selections. This is not fancy editing. And then I was looking at my records to see, was there anything close? And it just so happened that one of his musical selections was right on the money for this everybody get down on the floor and do your thing. And so I dubbed it right over it, and was very, very worried. But I wanted to do it anyway, and it aired. And the damnedest thing is, nobody said anything. Nobody. Reverend Battle never said a word. Arch never said a word. Listeners never called. I don't know what. I know it was on the air. I don't know if nobody was listening or what. Or maybe the Reverend Battle thought that it was a nice substitution.
Each announcer had a different color pin that you would write the number of the commercial card. So maybe Altman Furniture was number 29 or whatever. And so if Phil Goodwin did that commercial and his color was green, and I think his color was green, then that 29 would be written in green felt tip pen. And the reason that was done, of course, is so we could break the commercials up. So you didn't have, a Phil Goodwin commercial followed by a Phil Goodwin commercial followed by a Phil Goodwin commercial. My color was orange, I remember that. I was very proud the day that I actually got a color assigned to me. That was a big moment in my career.
I thought the equipment was state of the art. I mean, some sound effects were on records, and music was on records. So you'd have two turntables, and you might cue up a sound effect here for this one, and cue up a music thing, and then you go, oh, but we have a lot more things. So we had cart machines. We have the two turntables here, and so we could fire off a couple of things, and I could do the voice. But sometimes it needed other things too. There might be a ringing phone came in later in the commercial, or a typewriter or something. So you'd take one of these carts and you'd put 2 or 3 sound effects on it. So it might have 3. You could make as many cuts, tracks on the cart as you wanted to. You'd press the button and it would just play one track, and then it would queue up for the next one. So some commercials, they got pretty complicated, So maybe I'd have the seagulls on the turntable and the music over here, and I'd have the creaking ship on this cart, and then the ship's bell on this one. And then it would come time to do it. And you'd do it all in real time. So the second hand would come up to the 12, and we begin. We slip cue this record, let it start playing, and I'm looking at the copy and reading it, but at the same time I'm looking up at the clock, to say, okay, now it's almost time for this to come in, and now you're talking some more, and then you hit this button, and then it either all works or it doesn't. And if it didn't work, then you have to re-cue everything and do it again. But that's all I knew. That's how you did it, I thought. And pretty much that's how you did do it. That's before 8-track tapes, where you could, or multi-track tapes, or multi-track recorders where you could put everything on there in its place and move it around, and that was a lot easier. But because I had to do everything in real time and do the character or the announcer or whatever I was doing, and keep track of all the sound effects, mixing it on the fly the whole time to make sure nothing was louder than it was supposed to be, that really taught me how to do it. So I really learned, and that all that training, really paid off in when I grew up and got a real job. Kind of a sounder, and then you're on a ship. You can hear the ship creaking and the seagulls flying by.
So I put on my best pirate voice, which I could do pretty well. I go, "Arr, fast there, mateys! What's the matter with the men? They seem to be a little lackadaisical." He says, "Well, maybe they need some oranges, sir." He says, "Well, I'm giving them oranges, but they're holding them up to their ears."
Oranges were, helped to keep sailors from getting scurvy in the old days. So that's how I came up with this, orange ship, kind of thing. And so the men really, enjoy listening. We need more oranges. The men really enjoy listening to WJMA, and they're especially fond of Phil Goodwin in the afternoon, because they say Phil fills them in. Just stuff like that. But they came out pretty well, and they were surprisingly memorable.
I remember that so well. I can even remember how he put in a little ship's bell. It went ding, ding, and it was just perfectly placed. It was just almost like a little musical score with the voices and the creaking of the rigging and the sound of the ocean and the men grumbling in below decks, and then ding, ding. It was great.
I was sitting in the newsroom and nothing had happened. I had called every police reporter I could think of. I had called all the fire companies. There was nothing going on with local government. There was nothing. And you've got to have something. You can't have nothing. And so in desperation, I grabbed one of the old Morances and just went up to Main Street and hoped something would happen. And when I got up there, I saw Smitty, William Smith, in a hole in front of the courthouse, and I thought, hot dog, I got my story. There's a broken water main, and it'll be a small story, but at least it'll be something. So I went running up with a microphone next to Smitty, and I said, hot dog, when are we going to get the water back on, Smitty? And he said, no, that's not a water main. That's not what I'm working on. We're just trying to find a water pipe here. I want to set up a water fountain. There used to be an old water fountain here, and I'm going to try to get it to work again. And so I was trying again to write something out of that in my mind, and it kind of came to me that you could go all the way from Mayfrey Avenue to Peliso in Orange without having a public water fountain. and I could just hear the Sons of the Pioneers singing Water in the background. And the story was kind of writing itself as I was driving back to the station.
The Orangetown crew was repairing the sidewalk at the corner of Main Street and Madison Road today when Town Superintendent William Smith discovered water.
All day I faced the barren waste without the taste of water, cool water.
This is where the tractor trailers have been turning the corner and breaking the sidewalk up, and we just redoing it, putting reinforcement in it, and in doing so, we thought we had a good opportunity to try to fix this old drinking fountain that had been out of service for 30 or 40 years, they tell me.
So Smitty and the town crews set forth to work on the fountain that would provide parched pedestrians with water.
What we're doing right now, we're running a new drain. We ran a new 3/4-inch line to it. We put new parts inside the old hydrant, which I got from W. H. Sherman Company.
Right.
And I'm hoping we're going to get it going. I'm missing one part. That little part that it's called the bubble.
And like any leader of pioneers, Smitty was quick to give credit to his crew.
Really, these guys here deserve all the credit. They the ones doing all the hard work.
Reporting from Madison Road and Main Street and still thirsty, I'm Phil Goodwin for WJMA News.
And at the time, all it was just we had to have something for that night. And I didn't realize what it was going to grow into. When it came time to enter entries for that year, I put it in as a feature entry, but I didn't think much of it because I didn't think it was going to get anything. It wasn't that big of a deal, but it did win regionally, and then it won nationally, and I thought it was interesting what they wrote. The judges said it shows how an enterprising reporter can find a story just by looking around and then employing good writing and strong editing with creative use of music to provide the right mood.
So that won in the state in VAB or VAPB?
No, it was RTNDA.
RTNDA.
Regional.
And then by virtue of winning regional,
it went national, and they judged them nationally, and it won the national award.
So where did you get it, and who gave it to you?
We went to Los Angeles, California. RTNDA was having the ceremony out there, and it was one of the top moments of my life because they were kind of lining us all up, and of course there were tons of awards. This was a national thing. And Andy Rooney was passing out the awards. And so when it came my time, I just walked across, and he shook my hand, and he leaned over, and I'll never forget what he said. He said, "I heard your piece. It was good writing." To have Andy Rooney say something you've done as a journalist is good writing, I mean, that's as high as you go. That's as high as you go.
The real reason that I got into radio is because I was lazy. I could sit on my behind and spin records. And you didn't have to work. At least that was the perception. There's a lot of work to it, so to be good at it.
I did not witness this, but I heard it many, many times. Chet, as we all know, is a taciturn type of fellow. Very, serious.
When Chet was there, of course, he would do most of the 5 o'clock report. Well, Chet was busy. He was out doing local news gathering, typing. It's going like a madman. So we'd always do him a favor. He'd always be running late for the 5 o'clock report. So typically we, Gene primarily, would go out and prepare his AP Wire copy.
I would take it off the AP line, all those sheets, tear them all off and line them up for him. This is the news, this is the sports.
And put it in Studio A, which was a room adjacent to the control room, visible to us through double glass, double window.
The AP Wire would sometimes chew up the paper. I mean, be writing along, writing the story, and then the paper would get chewed up, and it was illegible. And there was one of these things where apparently there was a bombing that happened, and then it got stopped, and it says, and the bomb, and then after it was illegible.
And at the very last part of the sentence, I just print it in myself, and it went boom.
And I picked it up and took it into to Chet's studio.
But I did it just for fun.
So Chet began the news. Gene started the news theme. It's 5 o'clock, 72 degrees. With the news, Chet Burgess. Chet sat down right then. He started reading. And the first part of the sentence was legitimate. And then we got to Gene's part, for her creative writing. There was a bomb exploded today at LaGuardia Airport in New York. Witnesses at the scene said it went boom.
And he totally lost it.
We didn't expect Chet would actually read it, but he did.
He totally lost it. They had to cut to a commercial, and he could not recover.
And he began to laugh. Gene began to laugh. I was standing up next to the transmitter at that time, and I began to laugh. Nobody could move.
He totally lost it, and it was just great.
I slid down the wall. Gene was doubled over. She couldn't touch the control board. Chet, he must have fallen out of his chair by this time. Finally, Chet recovered and said, "Now this." Gene hit the commercial.
I remember laughing until my stomach hurt.
Gene loved it. Oh, she told that story so many times. The bomb went boom. It was great.
And it went boom.
Some of the memories of World War II veterans, like Tommy Brown and Jack Samuels, and with the music and some of the recordings, FDR, A Day in Infamy, all that weaved in. I mean, that was good stuff. That was some good radio.
You know, men of that age, they laugh and joke about the things, and you might as well do it, huh? And enjoy it, because, and then sometimes it would get real rough.
Man, that was a hot spot, because the Germans had almost pushed us off that beachhead. It was a tense moment, I can tell you that.
We executed him there on the beach by a fire squad.
We were taking on water up in the forward torpedo room, and now if you got in and straightened up with the law, that's the time you start doing it.
We could just see the Germans running in groups out of those gun emplacements when those big guns were flying right into the side of the hill. And that's really what saved our neck, I guess, or we would have been slaughtered like the 116th Infantry was.
It was just tremendous radio. And it was preserving history. It was great. It was oral history.
We decided just on a whim to do an April Fool's joke as a takeoff on his business as an optician. And he said that one of the biggest sellers that he had were his Hindsight glasses. And if you have Hindsight glasses, the wonderful thing about those is your vision becomes 20/20. And he'd had a lot of those had come out just a week or two earlier, and he'd had a lot of requests for them. But one of the people he really wanted to get them was President Reagan, because if President Reagan had had the Hindsight glasses, he would have never gotten into that Iran-Contra mess that he did. So that was probably the most off-the-wall story I did while I was there. That may have been the story Pat was talking about. What the hell was that?
At one point, Ann Harrison was interning with us in the news department, and she'd gone up on Main Street because there's something on the scanner saying there was some kind of rescue squad call right there at the crossroads of Madison Road and Main Street, and she went up there, and a pedestrian had been killed, and she came back, and she was all, what do I do? And I sort of figuratively grabbed her by the shoulders and gave her a great big shake. And I said, Ann, tell me what happened. He said, this man was killed on Main Street. I said, I couldn't have said it better myself. That's perfect. That's your lead. And so he taught me, and I passed it on to Ann, which is kind of ironic, that, the lead is the thing. And you don't have to say all, who, what, where, when, why, to what extent in one sentence. That's kind of old style journalism. But if you can hit them with a punchy lead, then the rest will fall into place very nicely.
It's hard for me to imagine what JMA would be like if Arch were here now and tried to operate it the same way he did, because the climate is so different, and I'm sure he probably would have gone to some kind of an internet. We would all be blogging from the station and we would be podcasting. But the problem is that maybe people our age in Orange are still willing to listen very intently to local news or to thorough long news stories. And I would imagine quite a few of us are listening to NPR now, all things considered, because that is the place where you get that kind of radio now. I don't know that it exists in other places.
Radio seems to be losing its purchase in the minds of the younger generation. They're stuck to iPods and they're making their own playlist, and I don't really know what the future of radio as we know it will be. I have no idea. But we don't have as much mind space as we used to have, I know that, especially with the younger generation. I think a smaller percentage of younger people spend a lot of time listening to the radio than they did when we were kids, I think. Anyway, that's my impression. A lot of times, when some new technology comes, it reveals a dissatisfaction that had been there all along with the older technology. I remember when CDs came along, I realized how much I'd hated LPs just for the fact that you couldn't keep them clean. They'd always develop ticks and pops. And I really appreciated having CDs because they were always perfect. And I realized really how much I hated LPs. The internet comes along and you can make an end run around the former 2 or 3 or 4 news sources, and people begin to realize what a nice thing it is to be able to hear news from other reporters who share their assumptions about the world. So when it comes to radio, when you can make your own mixtapes, I think a lot of people realize, or maybe they've decided that I don't like having to sit through stuff that I don't really like very much when I can listen to only the things that I like, only the music that I like, and nothing else. And of course, there's centrally programmed outfits like Clear Channel, they're doing their best to please a huge number of people, but so frequently they succeed in not pleasing very many at all, because of you just can't do it. It's like it says in that Rick Nelson song, Garden Party, you can't please everybody, you got to please yourself. And I think that's what people, when they get their iPods and listen to internet radio with a very dedicated, narrow casting type of philosophy, they realize that they start seeing things that they didn't like about radio before. I have a feeling that may be happening now. I don't know. But it's new technology that makes it possible.